Looking for cheap games? Check out Instant Gaming. With up to 90% off, you'll be able to fall in love with your next favourite dream game. Go check them out, link below. So it's been a wild, watery season, but this season is finally coming to a dry end, which means it's time to conclude our build playlist as usual for this season. So in this video, we'll be looking at the top 3 builds overall for Season 21, for which you should be using in Season 22. These builds are what I personally think are the best from Season of the Deep, in order and for PvE. As always, the builds listed will be adjustable and optimised for usage next season, or whatever season you want to use them in, because they won't rely on specific seasonal mods from the artifact, which just means you can make those slight adjustments to slot on any new crazy perks that you'll get with the new seasonal artifact, but I'll leave the dim links below for the full setup from this season and just go through what we already have. So just be aware that come next season, you will want to make some minor changes to these builds. And also just to quickly point out, I have taken into consideration some of the nerfs coming to next season, so our crazy Strand Titan build, which would have been in first place, will not be featured in this top 3 due to those changes coming into Season 22. So guys, if you missed my Season 22 prep video, make sure to go check that one out later, but for now, rate, comment, subscribe and share, and now let's start our top 3. Now firstly, if you love one of these builds shown, or you want the full in-depth build setup guide for each one for Season 21, and you have a basic idea of what sort of mods or perks you should be slotting in next season, then you can check out those related builds individually. There will be cards as always popping up on screen at the start of each showcase to take you to those separate videos, as those will use seasonal perks from Season 21. So you can check that out if you want to maximise the build's effectiveness currently for Season of the Deep. So starting in third place, we have our crazy Titan hammer build. Now this is one build I actually didn't cover this season, mostly because I generally prefer the arc, and I'm just terrible at throwing hammers. They usually just yeet off the map, then the build is pointless for me. But for those who aren't bad at throwing hammers, this is one build that is so powerful in a lot of endgame content, because you have infinite restoration, an on-demand restoration for whenever you need it. You're going to have increased melee DPS, and overall you just cannot die in all types of content up to GM level. This is good because you could use this build to go into any dungeon and easily do a solo flawless, because using the hammers we have, all we have to do is throw them at ads, pick it back up and then repeat, and it's just a solid build for not only ad clearing, but also as a small source of DPS against smaller bosses and champions, and also a great build for survivability if you're someone who struggles to stay alive a lot in endgame PvE. It does work better when you're playing solo, because you kind of don't want people killing the ads, and more importantly, you don't want people killing ads when it comes to using the hammers in higher level content, because we want our exotic Synthoceps to kick in so that we have more melee damage while surrounded by ads, and the restoration will just keep us alive anyway, so it really works well. So to set up this build, you want to run the Titan Sunbreaker solo subclass, and the main things you need here are firstly the throwing hammer. This is what the build is focused around, so you 100% want this on. Then we're using a healing grenade just as a backup in case we either lose our hammer, or we just need a quick instant health and restoration for whatever reason. Aspects we have are going to be Soul Invictus, so our solar ability final blows create sunspots and give us restoration, and Roaring Flame so that we can stack up that DPS with our hammer when getting kills with it. Very important for endgame content. The fragments we have are Ember of Imperium, so solar weapon or ability final blows extend restoration and radiant effects. Ember of Solace, so those effects last a little longer than normal. Ember of Singeing, so that our class ability recharges faster when we scorch targets. And Ember of Torches, so that our melee hits make us radiant. And because of that infinite radiant effect, we'll be able to take down barrier champions with any of our weapons, which is a great addition to the build. Now exotic armor, we are running the Synthoceps. What this does is give us increased melee range and improves the damage of it while surrounded, and since this is a melee build, we're going to be surrounded pretty much all the time, so if you're using hammers on bosses for DPS, try and leave a few ads roaming around so that you can get that damage stack. For mods, the only requirements here are heavy-handed in the arms to generate orbs on melee kills, as well as an impact induction to get grenades faster. For the legs, you want absolution, as well as a better already and innovation. Basically you'll get faster abilities, but also picking up orbs, you'll trigger health regen. Just a nice thing for the times you don't have restoration active. The last thing here is in the class, we just have a distribution and 2 bomber mods for reduced ability cooldowns. Everything else is optional, but that's basically all you need for this build to work effectively, and if you have anything in the seasonal artifact that will improve the build, then that will be a bonus, but for Season 21 there isn't, so this build can only get better. But that is our third build, so on to number 2. Now in second place, we have the Hunter Gyrfalcon's build, and boy does this cause complete chaos. With this build, you're going to get Infinite Invisibility, Infinite Devour, which means health on every single kill, faster grenades, you're going to have volatile rounds, and in general with this build, as long as you're running around just killing stuff with void weapons, you no joke cannot die. Because you're going to kill enemies with volatile void weapons, you're going to go invis and then repeat the cycle, and that just loops over and over, but at the same time as going invisible, you're going to refresh your health too. It's honestly crazy how insane this build is in endgame PvE. It just dominates Master and Grandmaster content, and this is probably my favourite build of all time, especially when we have some great artifact perks to pair with it. But the best part about this build is that it doesn't even need artifact perks, they just help make the build even more lethal. So to set this one up, you're going to want to run the Void Night Stalker subclass with the Hunter's Shadow Shot Deadfall. You can use Mobius Quiver, but I prefer the Shadow Shot. You are going to want a Gambler's Dodge to recharge your melee ability, and a Vortex Grenade, but the grenade doesn't really matter. For aspects, we have Stylish Executioner, so defeating volatile targets makes us invisible, and since we're using the Gyrfalcon's exotic, our void weapons gain volatile rounds after we emerge from being invisible, so that's how that loop works. And we'll start that loop by going invisible with our second aspect, the Vanishing Step, where dodging makes you invisible. And as long as you have 100 mobility, you're going to get that back pretty quick as it is. For fragments, we have Echo of Cessation, so defeating volatile targets creates a Void Breach. Echo of Starvation, so that picking up a Void Breach or an orb will grant us Devour, which Devour will give us grenade energy on kills as well as instant max health. Then Echo of Persistence, so that those effects last longer, and Echo of Dilation, just for the extra stats because you want 100 mobility. If you can get away without it, go for Echo of Expulsion or something, but the subclass and exotic on its own are going to do all the work anyway. Just make sure you're running void weapons. Running double primary and a heavy void machine gun seems to work really well. You won't really ever run out of ammo much. So for me, a Commemoration worked really well to deal with the barriers from the volatile rounds that we have. A Lemon Bow is a great bow to run to deal with overloads, and whatever primary weapon you need for unstoppables. So you basically have every champion covered without having to make any adjustments to your loadout for the activities requirement. For mods, the only things you need are a Void Siphoning helmet for orbs, a Void Loader, and 2 Ballstring detonations in the arms, your Void Scavenger mod in the legs and some cooldown mods, and for the class ability, a Bomber with 2 utility kickstart mods, because you want that dodge back as soon as possible. Again, artifact perks will make the build better, but it's not a requirement as we have that base setup already, so they're just extras. Here is the mod screen setup if you want to copy this, or go check out the dim link below, but now let's move on to our number 1 build of this season. So finally, in first place, this wouldn't be a top 3 without our OP Hunter Arc build. Now I know what you're thinking, no Warlock build, but what about Sunbracers? Yeah, don't get me wrong, Warlocks have some really good builds, but when it comes to endgame PvE, I'm 100% going with the Hunter Arc build over a Warlock Solar Sunbracers build, because it's more consistent when it comes to survivability. So with this build, we will be able to run around just punching everything in the face with our melee, jolting and blinding enemies, melting champions and bosses, while also going invisible on every single kill and stacking up big DPS buffs. Now you can use 2 exotics with this build, Liar's Handshake and Assassin's Cowl. I prefer Assassin's Cowl because it gives us health and invis on every single kill, which just makes survivability and endgame content much better, so that's going to be our choice of exotic. As for the build itself, you want to run the Hunter Arc Strider subclass, and with it run a Gambler's Dodge. You 100% need this one on. For the melee, you're going to want to run a Combination Blow, and grenade I usually go with a Pulse Grenade, and I'll get to why in just a second. But for aspects, Lethal Current, after dodging your next melee attack has increased range, jolts the target, and creates a damaging aftershock. Punching them again will then blind them, so you can use that to stun unstoppables. Our second aspect, Flow State, defeating a jolted target makes you amplified. As for the fragments, you want to run Spark of Resistance for obviously increased resistance, Spark of Instinct for some extra jolts, Spark of Feedback for extra melee damage, and Spark of Shock so that our arc grenades can jolt targets, which is good because then that Pulse Grenade will instantly stun overloads, so we don't need to mess around with stunning them while we're running around on a melee killing spree. You can use your Super too, but I only recommend using Gathering Storm as a last resort. As for the mods, you want triple hands-on in the helmet for faster supers, 2 impact inductions and a heavy-handed mod for orbs and reduced grenade cooldown, an emergency reinforcement in the chest for extra protection, 2 grenade cooldown mods in the legs when picking up orbs, and 3 bomber mods in the class for faster grenades too. So we shouldn't have any problems getting our grenade back quickly while we're just running around doing our thing and punching ads to death. But again, with the artifact, nothing much is benefiting this build, so it can only get better. I do recommend having 100 resilience and discipline as your main stat focus, but other than that, if you have this build set up the way I do and you use it correctly, you're going to finish master content so much quicker when playing solo than using any other build, because you're not even using ammo, the melee is just doing everything. You might have a few times where you mess up, and if that does happen, just take a step back and restart your melee spree when you can. It is one of those builds where you need a lot of ads around for it to work, so don't go into content where you only have bosses and a few snipers shooting at you, because you will probably die. The build isn't suitable for every single activity. Now guys, that is all for your top 3 builds this season and the top 3 builds to use in season 22. As always, if you want to see the full in-depth build setup for each, view the cards on screen or the links in the description. Otherwise guys, stay tuned for my next build series for season 22. So until then, have a good one, leave a rating and comment what your favourite build is, go check out my sponsor for cheap games, and I'll see you guys very soon for the new season.